thank you.
You're welcome. Morning,
Hi,
John.
kiddo. How are you?
Hi, John. Oh. Huh?
I must be here a little earlier this morning, huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Hi, Dave.
What'd you think of Illuminate? That was kind of interesting, wasn't it?
Kids really liked it.
I found the younger the demographic, the more
Thank you.
enjoyable.
Because about the halfway point,
I've seen, yeah.
Well, I loved it.
And, okay, I also found it very entertaining.
I did too. It was kind of amazing how they could go.
I was like, oh, you know, my wife, I was like, don't you like the storyline? She goes, there's a storyline?
I didn't go.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I just like the light show and the whole bit and all that stuff, so.
I know, I just know how they coordinated all that stuff.
Well, that's it, hit your marks and have the lights come on and off at just the right
It had to be all like
Oh,
computers.
completely. But the people still had to hit their,
Oh, yeah.
you know, be standing there when they'd flash and then immediately move over to here
And
and
run,
flash.
if I was running around in the dark, I'd be running in there.
Oh, yeah, we had a heck of a mess, wouldn't we? But yeah, it was fun.
It was fun.
But I did talk to a couple of people as the age demographic got older. Some said, we left at halftime or intermission.
Yeah,
as it
I
were.
heard that too.
But it was pretty darn
I'm in the
well attended.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, packed house.
Do you want coffee?
Yeah, I can help you with that. I'm heading that way.
I'm good. I'm in here, so.
Are you? I'm gonna pack my bags in the back anyways.
Hi. I'm here.
You're here, huh?
Hi, Daryl. Yeah, you're here. We're here.
Yeah.
Morning, sir.
Hey, John.
Oh, new schedule, huh?
Finally.
All right.
We need to rip that out from you.
Fine, thanks.
Oh, where did her?
Thank you.
Mm-mm.
You're gonna be here today?
No, you're getting.
Is Gary gonna be here?
Yeah, I called it. Confirmed it.
Confirmed it? Yeah.
He doesn't show you.
I will.
I see your signs.
Oh yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Morning, sir.
How you doing, Dave?
Good deal. How was that?
Yeah. 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 Well, I am.
Doing good.
What?
I may not tell the lucky
Well,
guy.
depends. No.
3 weeks and it'll be over. Yep.
Well, what do you want? No, absolutely. What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe I'm doing as good as I should do right now.
That, yeah. Well, planning is a challenging role.
Yeah.
It really is. So, and it's an important role.
But I follow you. Yeah.
John,
Hi, John.
y'all ready for today?
See ya.
See who shows up.
I talked to Paul, and
Okay. And again, I've read it, but I'm coming up with you as well. So this is the current model, the 2017. This is the proposed 2018. Okay. So it's going from a 4-tier copay to a 70-30 split co-insurance. Okay.
What concerns me is I've got a couple of people, employees, that when I've talked with them about it, when I read this and tried to figure it out, and their retail, their RXs, is like $5,000 a month.
So they're heavy on the prescription side. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, and if it was a 70-30,
For the individual, I don't think you're reading it wrong. I think that's what it is. Now, what I don't know, and I wanted some clarification on, is the tiering system. I didn't see it, and maybe I overlooked it or whatever, of what it was existing or whatever.
yeah, you know, I was trying to compare, I mean, I don't know what the current is.
This is, right.
But just some questions that I had on behalf of folks. that
Folks
I
that
talked to.
around you and everything else, yeah.
And I don't know if it's appropriate for me to.
70-30 co-insurance pool for both medical, it's very specific, both medical and prescription.
All right, I believe we are live this morning. It is 9 a.m. on Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. Would like to welcome everyone to the City Council meeting, and particularly all of our young students who are here on a subject that we'll be bringing up a little bit later. So we'd like to welcome everybody here.
Welcome.
Please call roll.
Iris De Carvalho, Soldner,
Here.
Inskeep,
Here.
Deckent,
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to introduce Gary Getting for our morning prayer.
Shall we pray? Father, indeed, we are grateful for the blessings of living in this land of liberty, for life, for the prosperity that we enjoy as Americans and as citizens of this community. We're grateful for those who serve us in this chamber and throughout our community in various ways. We pray your hand of protection, guidance upon each one for the discussions, the decisions that are made here today that affect the citizens of this community. I ask for wisdom and discernment so that the best thing, the right thing can be done and would serve to help each one of us. Again, Lord, we're just grateful for everything you've done for us in Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right, next item.
Item 4, oral communications from the audience.
All right, this is the time that we set aside to invite anybody in the audience that would like to come forward and to make any comments. Please limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please introduce yourself and on items that are related to the community of Hutchinson. So is there anyone in the audience? Hi, Jana.
Good morning, Jana McCarran, Director of Planning and Development, and I have 2 short announcements this morning. The first is you probably saw these by your space this morning. The city is partnering with the Reno County Young Professionals to do a kind of a first impressions. We're calling it a perception survey. And so we just invite you and anybody else who would want to go online to take the survey. You can either scan the code on the coaster or go to our website, www.hutchgov.com/planning, and there's a link to the survey there. And then one other announcement I had is we received a grant from the Community Foundation earlier this year. And the planning department has been partnering with other entities in the community to host seminars, educational seminars related to housing and neighborhoods. And we have one more seminar coming up on October 23rd. It's going to be a sidewalk repair seminar. It'll be held at 331 West Sherman Avenue, which is Monday night at 6 p.m., 331 West Sherman Avenue. And Jeff Thompson from Interfaith Housing is going to show people how to repair their sidewalks. It's going to be a hands-on thing. He's going to take out some old sidewalk, mix concrete, pour some new sidewalk. So if you're interested in going, you can visit our website to sign up or go to our Facebook page. We have the link to it there.
What time again does that start, Jana?
6 p.m.
6?
next Monday night.
If he ever wants to host it near my office, there's a bad spot there. That
That's a good idea.
we could work it out.
Well, that'll cost you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jana.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience this morning? All right, seeing none, next item.
Item 5, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes?
Dave Line.
Yes, next item.
Item 6, consider resolution establishing water rates.
Morning, Brian.
Good morning. My name is Brian Clinton. I'm the Director of Public Works. The proposed water rates for 2018 through 2022 were discussed with City Council in a couple study sessions here this past year, one in May and the other in July. And during the July study session, Council gave staff the go-ahead to proceed with the rates that are listed in the resolution attached to the memo in your packet. Water rates were last increased in 2011, and in 2016, the Water Fund had a deficit of about $362,000. The goal of our proposed 5-year rate increase is to increase our investment in the replacement of our aging waterline infrastructure, to generate sufficient revenue to meet the anticipated expenditures that we'll have by 2022. and to maintain our minimum required balance of approximately $1.5 million. In your memo, there's a table, and it compares our rates to surrounding communities. And you'll see that Hutchinson falls right in about the center of those communities, those surrounding communities, and their water rates. On the second page of the memo is a table that shows the water rate history since 2003. And the thing I'd like to note is that the average water use has decreased from 900 cubic feet to 680 cubic feet for the typical resident since 2003. And that number directly impacts the amount of revenue that we're able to generate through water sales. And just for example, in 2012, we had $6.9 million in water sales. And in 2016, we had $6.2 million in water sales. So a loss of $700,000 a year. And then finally, just to put the cost of water in perspective, and something that maybe we all understand more so than 100 cubic feet, it's going to cost our residents half a penny to use a gallon of water in 2018. And then by 2022, it's going to cost 0.6 of a penny for every gallon of water that's used. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Brian, thanks for that overview. For the benefit of the public, City Council has deliberated these proposed water rates for 2 budget sessions, both in 2017 that we deferred till 2018, so we're now considering this for 2018. So has not gone without a great deal of discussion. Just one question for the benefit, I think, of the public. You talk about $6.2 million in sales revenue based on this rate increase. Could you break that down to share with us what the average annual investment would be in replacing water lines? Typically, what do we invest annually in replacing water lines?
Yeah, with the rate increases, we'll be able to invest $1,100 per water line miles. We have about 315 miles of water line. So we'll be investing $1,100 per water line miles. Now, when we compare ourselves to Garden City and Hayes, they're both budgeting about $4,800 per water line mile. So still not quite where we'd like to be. Our goal is to replace 3 miles of water line every year, which would take about $1.5 million.
That's the number there.
That's our goal.
1.5,
We're not going to
okay.
be able to get there. We're going to be about a third of that, about $500,000 a year in replacements.
Okay, so that's the targeted goal for investment annually?
That is, yeah.
Right, okay, that's very helpful, yeah. Council, do you have any other questions? And why don't you maybe briefly share with us what your table shows in terms of what this average is over the next 5 years, the annual increase of approximately 5.5%, I think is where we landed, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There'll be a 5.5 to 5.6% increase every year from 2018 through 2022.
Through 2022.
That's
so,
right.
So the user has some idea of
That's right.
on the
And
next
just for
5
a
years.
typical resident, that's going to be $1.38 a month increase.
$1.38 a month.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, it's an essential service of the city because every morning we get up, we expect all those things to be at our disposal. So we appreciate the Public Works Department and engineering providing that assurance every year. So, Council, do you have any other questions?
Brian, a couple things.
Yeah.
On the decrease of water sale of about 700,000, with less water being used, what's the decrease in our cost to process water? Excuse me,
You
through
know,
the
I
water
don't-
treatment plant and that kind of thing. So
Right.
with a $700,000 decrease, I would assume there's some decrease in costs associated with
Right.
handling
The
less water.
decrease would come in chemicals and electricity. I don't have those numbers, but we still have the same manpower to operate the plant. We still have all the 300 miles of water line out
Sure.
there to maintain. So not a significant reduction in costs.
Okay. We just finished Project Downtown this year on the streets, and of course there would have been some work on water lines as part of that, am I correct?
Yes.
Does that part of the project which has to do with water lines that would come out of our water reserves, am I
It
correct?
does. That's correct.
Okay, so that's part of that mileage that we'd hope to
Yes. Yes.
repair or upgrade within a year's time, okay? That's all I have, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions of Brian? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion?
I move we approve the approve a resolution establishing the rates and charges for municipal water and water services as authorized by section 20-301 of the Hutchinson City Code and as amended and as presented to us this morning by staff.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comments? All right, seeing none, please call roll.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes?
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 6B, consider resolution establishing sewer rates.
The sewer rates were discussed a couple times here this past year, and the rates were last increased in 2011, similar to the water. In 2016, the sewer fund had a deficit of about $236,000. Again, we got the proposed goals for this 5 years of increases is to, again, increase our investment in sewer rehabilitation and also wastewater treatment plant improvement projects. And Jeff Peterson's going to be presenting a little bit later about a bid award for one of those sewer rehab projects. So he's got some pictures that he'll show you
Okay.
that will help you understand a little bit better about what those rehab type projects are. We also want to generate sufficient revenue to meet anticipated expenditures by 2022, and then again maintain our minimum required balance of approximately $1.5 million. Again, we've got a table in your memo, and it shows how our rates compare to our surrounding communities, and you'll see we're about the lowest rate compared to all of the communities that we surveyed in Kansas, and there's about 12 or 13 communities that we surveyed. And then on the back page again, you've got the sewer rate history, and again, just like water, we've had a decrease in the amount of water used or wasted in the sewer fund, and again, that has a direct impact on the amount of revenue that we're able to generate. And again, going back to 2012, the sewer user fees generated $5.8 million worth of revenue. In 2016, we had $5.5 million in revenue, so a loss of $300,000 a year. And then again, just to kind of get that number in something that we all understand,
Right.
a gallon, it costs our residents 0.4 of a penny to dispose of a gallon of water. And by 2022, it's going to cost half a penny to dispose of a gallon of water. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Same question in terms of the probable annual investment in sewer line replacements.
And what we're looking at doing is, again, we've got a sewer rehab project that just bid last week, and that project will begin construction here this year. And we'd anticipate a similar project every other year. So in 2019, again, looking at probably spending around $1 million for sewer rehab projects.
For rehab projects.
And we also have some needed investments and improvements out at the wastewater treatment plant. Before long, we'll be discussing with the council a replacement of the screw pumps, the screw lift pumps. And I think those of you who've been out to the treatment plant know what those are. We also have our ultraviolet disinfection that is aging infrastructure and needs to be upgraded. So there's a couple major projects out there at the wastewater treatment plant.
Well, we've got a whole host of would-be civil engineers out here in the audience that are listening very intently to your engineering thoughts.
Very good.
All right, Council, you have any other questions of Mr. Clennon?
I've got a couple things. I want to back up to water for just a minute. I missed a couple things.
All right.
I noted that the comparison chart, I believe the rates were all for water, the rates were all from 2015 for the other localities. So I would imagine we may even compare even more favorably than being in the middle. We may be towards the lower end as well in that regards. For sewer, I noted that the rates were comparing with their 2016. Now, as you've noted, we're already the lowest, but I'd say that their rates are probably, or could well be higher than what we have information on at this point. For both water and sewer, Brian, if you could speak to it. You've talked about planned projects, and we'll be hearing about the one in the sewer, but what sort of maintenance costs, whether it's breakages of water lines or breakages or damage of some sort or another in sewer lines, what kind of money, time do we spend on an annual basis and those kind of things? That hopefully, obviously, a project would take care of that particular section for a good number of years.
Right. And the water main breaks that we have, it's hard to quantify a cost because they're so different, you know, whether it's a large break that takes up a bunch of pavement or not, but I can speak in terms of the number of water main breaks we've had recently. And we had a 5-year average of main breaks from 1986 to 1990. Our 5-year average was 43 main breaks a year. And from 2011 to 2015, the 5-year average was 86 water main breaks a year. So it's
exactly
doubled.
doubling.
Double.
It has, and we see that trend continuing. And that just points to the critical need of replacing the aging water line infrastructure.
Okay.
And those are, I mean, not only does it cost us money to pay the overtime to send folks out, but it's an inconvenience to businesses and to residents when their water's shut off for 8 hours, which is, you know, typically about the time it takes us to make a repair.
Do you have some numbers similar to that in terms of damage to sewer lines, or that requires a maintenance or a cleaning or a?
I can tell you that the sewer infrastructure, we don't have as many callbacks as we do for the water infrastructure. And we've been doing some pretty aggressive preventive maintenance on the sewer system here in the last probably 10 years, where we're actively going in and cleaning every sewer line every 5 years. And that's really lowered the number of sewer plugs that we've had. There was just recently a pretty large collapse right behind First National Bank in that alley, and that was a significant cost. And so we're hoping that the rehab projects that Jeff will be bringing to you will prevent some of those large sewer collapse and sewer failures.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, council, of Mr. Clennon? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Okay, all right, I will move to approve the resolution establishing rates and charges for access to and use of the City of Hutchinson's municipal wastewater collection and treatment facilities, as authorized by Section 19803 of the City Code as amended, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or comments?
You want those things to function.
Yes. Seeing none, please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Item 6C, consider ordinance annexing portions of North Plum and 43rd Avenue.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. Council, understand from the outset, we're just annexing the other side of the road.
Yeah.
That's
right,
all this is.
I know.
There was a previous agreement between the city and the county to improve the roads, for the county to reimburse the city for a portion of those costs, which they have done. And then the agreement was to annex the other side of the roads into the city. And you've got a map in your agenda packet that shows those portions on North Plum and on 43rd. And it is required by statute once we are notified. So we have that before you to approve.
Okay. Has the work been completed?
I believe so.
I see a nod from engineering, so very good. Okay. All right. Council, do you have any questions?
I'm just glad, Paul, that you pointed that out. I received a phone call or two that said we were annexing up to 56th Street and property and other things like that. I assured them that wasn't the case. So yes, just the road, just the other side of the road.
The other side of the road.
And thank you.
And
All right, very good.
Well,
Yes.
and correct me if I'm wrong, there have been some conflicts in other locales throughout the state
between city and county over this. And I just want to compliment ourselves, that our county and our city, both in terms of the governing bodies and the administrative staff, that we don't have to go to court against each other to achieve what needs to be achieved. So I think that's worth noting for folks as well, that going to court costs money and burns time and that kind of thing. So I'm pleased that we're getting this done. We have to get it done, and we're not having to litigate over it to do it.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. All right, are we ready for a motion then?
I'll tackle this one. I will move to approve ordinance including incorporating and certifying certain land within the limits and boundaries of the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, North Plum extending to the north boundary line of Kissawa Village, subdivision north to 43rd Avenue, two portions of East 43rd Avenue extending from Charleston Street east to the city limits line west of Pagoda Street, and from Sequoia Street east approximately 1/4 mile to the city limits, and north of Plum Street from 43rd Avenue north to the city limits, and authorize the mayor to sign.
All right, very good. Motion. Do we have a second?
Would you repeat that?
Yeah, like, the middle? What do you, yeah.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? All right, please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7A, report on tobacco-free parks administrative regulation.
Okay, before Justin makes a presentation, I kind of want to just go back about 30 days. That you all were here about 30 days ago. We appreciate that, and presented to the City Council a draft proposal on tobacco-free in our city parks. And we suggested at that time that we would refer this to to city staff, and they would evaluate your proposal and then report back to the City Council their recommendations. And so with that, I would introduce Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities, to begin this discussion. And I also might mention, we'll have a good discussion here this morning. We'll have a full opportunity for you all to make some comments and relevant to the proposal. So with that, Justin, look forward to hearing your report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'm Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. On September 5th, a group of local students came to City Council, a group called Communities That Care, and made a presentation entitled Smell the Flowers, Not the Smoke. They stated that parks are a place for healthy activities and a place that promotes healthy choices, a place to enjoy nature and enjoy the outdoors. They urged City Council to develop some sort of policy or ordinance that banning smoking and tobacco use in public parks. As the Director of the Parks Department, I do agree with the statement that parks are a place that promote healthy living, healthy activities. It's a place we can enjoy the outdoors. And through that presentation, really some internal conversations started. That really got the ball rolling about, is this really an issue in the parks? And if it is, what's the best approach to it to tackle it? And that kind of got me thinking about, what's my goal for all of this? And for me, it wasn't necessarily about I want to try to go out and penalize people that do a certain activity in the parks, but it's more, I want to educate people about smoking, about secondhand smoke. I want to provide parks that reduce the chance of exposure to secondhand smoke. And so kind of with that mindset and with the internal conversations that have already begun, the city attorney brought up an option in Chapter 13 of the City Code, which is the chapter that talks about all the parks and has, defines all the parks, defines park hours, has lots of things about parks in there. On one of the sections gives the city manager and myself the authority to create an administrative regulation. And after talking with Paul, the city attorney, that obviously differs from city ordinance. There's no, it's not a law. There's no attached penalty to it, but also really differs from a policy. This is a term I was using interchangeably, and Paul corrected me that this is an administrative rule, a park rule, not really even a policy. Policy generally would go to city council for approval. In this instance, this administrative regulation is something that the city manager and I can do just simply administratively create a park rule. So really what that does is it would allow us to sign all the parks, playgrounds, places where people gather, with a sign that is more educational in nature, not necessarily just a cigarette with a big X through it. It would allow our user groups to have a little bit more authority to ask people to not smoke or not use tobacco products at organized events, such as soccer games and t-ball games and those sorts of things. Would also then give my staff, when we're out in the parks, more authority to ask somebody to please, stop the use of tobacco while in the park. So, and so, kind of thinking all this through, was really kind of supportive of that idea. In our very initial conversations about how do we tackle this, enforcement was always a question and always a problem. And so I think this really gives us the authority to educate people and to post signs without having that overwhelming or that overlooming issue of enforcement. Is police department going to be out writing $25 fines for everybody that smokes a cigarette in the parks? Some of those issues that came up with doing an ordinance. Through this administrative regulation, enforcement would really be done socially and through peer pressure and through signage and education. In my opinion, this is something that's needed in the parks. I'll give you two examples that happened to me 2 days apart. On last Friday, I was at the zoo, and Ryan Van Zant, the zoo director, and I were out in the parking lot looking at something, and as we walked in, we noticed a cigarette butt on a sidewalk, and he picked it up, actually burned his finger because the cigarette was still lit. 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, I was jogging on the trail and had to hold my breath as I passed some trail users that were smoking. So just in 3 days, it impacted me personally twice as a park user. And so that really kind of hit home with me. So I did have an opportunity to meet with 2 representatives from Communities with Care as well as their sponsor last week. And I kind of talked with them about the difference between an ordinance, a policy, and administrative regulation. Talked to them about some of the concerns about enforcement. And that I really felt like going this route with a park rule or administrative regulation was a good way to really at least start the conversation or continue the conversation about smoking on public facilities and tobacco use in general. And I think they understood. I think they were a little disappointed. I think I'm sure they'll speak to that they're we're interested more in a law as opposed to just a rule. But again, I think this regulation really addresses the issue in a way that's enforceable, in a way that accomplishes 90% of what we want to do. And the reason why I say 90% is it doesn't address all publicly owned facilities. So it doesn't address City Hall. It doesn't address fire stations. We did exempt the golf course from this. There's just a long-standing tradition and history, especially with cigar smoking and other things on the golf course. There are less likely to have youth at the golf course than at any other public park. So we did exempt the golf course. So with that, like I said, I do think this is a good route to address this issue. And I'm very supportive of that. And with this, I'll stand for questions. And I'm sure we have lots of folks that would like to comment on this as well.
Excellent overview, very much so to start the discussion this morning, Justin. I'd like to now ask Paul Brown to perhaps weigh in on your side of the legal side of the topic here. Mr. Brown?
Mayor, I don't have a lot to add, but there's more authority there than what you realize, because in the code, it gives Justin the authority to issue an administrative regulation, but the code has general provisions that pick up rules and regulations, and they do provide for penalties. In that same chapter for parks, enforcement of park rules, it provides that park rules posted at any city park will be enforced by the city. A violation of any rule so posted shall constitute a misdemeanor, and any person so convicted shall be punished in accordance with the provisions of Section 1-106, which is the general penalty provision for the entire code. And that penalty is up to 6 months in jail and a $500 fine. So even with an administrative regulation, you have both civil remedies to have someone removed from the area. You also have a remedy in municipal court for a citation to be issued. So this is plenty of authority to address this subject matter.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Did not know that.
I think to continue our discussions at the council, first of all, I want to compliment you, Justin, and the city attorney for your approach to presenting a good, solid alternative in terms of this administrative regulation. Is not familiar with that approach and the authority the city has. I think the approach that we're here this morning is that the city is certainly open and desires to continue or to begin to discourage the use of tobacco products in our city parks. I think that hopefully sends a message through the adoption of this. I think it promotes the health and welfare, particularly of our youth and our community, as is said in the report. To me, it seems like it's a very reasonable and responsible approach to adopting this administrative regulation rather than the ordinance. I think there's perhaps some issues with enforcement that I think has troubled all of us, and the city attorney has outlined some of those. The compliance procedure, I think the bullet points of a signage program, a community education, a public awareness, I think all speak to the voluntary approach that the city would take on this, and that if we do have violators, they can quietly be asked to be removed from the premises. So we're not doing a strong arm approach to the issue, but still addressing the issues. So I think with that, those thoughts there, I think your approach is very, very sound. So appreciate your work on this here.
Thank you.
Any other comments from council?
Justin, are you going to install like containers for people to dispose of a cigarette if they should have a cigarette in hand when they come to a park?
Yeah, and we do have some of those out already.
Okay.
Some of the areas that we know are problematic. Avenue A is a good example. Probably would be a good idea they're closer next to the sign to install one of those butt outs, I think
Yeah.
is what they call.
Yeah.
Would that send a mixed message, though, that smoking's encouraged there if there's a butt kit
Yeah, I know,
allowed
but
for?
you don't want people.
Yeah.
just
I don't want it on the
dumping
ground
them
either.
trash,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
on the ground.
Well,
Kind
and
of a
if they're
double-edged
lit.
sword.
It is.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a good question, though. Yeah.
I know the one concern I had expressed was from a grandmother who had the grandchild at one of the water parks and was frustrated with the amount of litter, tobacco-related litter that was on the ground. So, and I understand her point. So,
And I do understand this is not a cure-all. We're not
Oh,
I'm not
no.
going to sign this and throw up some few signs and expect everything to change overnight. So I know this is a slow process. So.
Justin,
Nope.
just
Oh,
kind of
please.
referenced some signage. What do you plan on doing in terms of the education that you talked about?
I'll probably lean on the health department, which you do have representatives from the health department here. I know they have some smoking and tobacco use education tools available. Also, the signs that we'll plan on using are not a typical non-smoking sign. It's called Young Lungs at Play. It has a link to Can Quit. Do we? Oh, we have one
We
right
do,
here.
yeah.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, we saw
So-
those when they were here before.
Thank you.
So, it's more of an education piece as opposed. I mean, obviously, it does have the symbol that everybody associates with no smoking, but it's also got Can Quit, which is a website and a phone number there for anybody who's interested, maybe in quitting. I think really it's just getting the message out there. When people do, exit their vehicle to go to a playground, that they'll see something like this, which I think they'll be more interested in reading this and understanding this message as opposed to just, we don't allow smoking or we don't allow tobacco
An
use.
ordinance.
From a nuts and bolts standpoint, what is the cost associated with the signing, the education piece, to implement this regulation?
From what I understand, the signs will be free.
Okay.
They will be given to us. We will have to buy post and then install the post. You know,
Fairly
so
minimal.
maybe a few $100s at most to sign playgrounds. You know, parking lots, kind of main sidewalks that come off the parking lots, those sorts of things. So it'll be very strategic. I'm not a big fan of having, you know, hundreds of signs throughout the park. And so we'll be very strategic about where we put them. So.
You mentioned that, I think you used the word our gated parks,
Correct.
Hobart Detter, and a couple of others. What, how is enforcement or upholding a no smoking in those areas worked or not worked, as the case may be?
So I talked with Tony Finley, director of Hutch Rec, about this yesterday afternoon. And they do not allow smoking at any of their gated or any of the city's gated facilities that they operate. So it's Hobart Detter, Salt City Splash, Fun Valley, as well as Dillon Nature Center, which isn't gated.
And does that also, sorry to interrupt, but does that also include the parking area of those facilities, or just once you enter the?
Probably just inside the gated area, just where, and that would be a good question for Tony. But my understanding is just inside the actual gated facility that they enforce that. Tony told me all of last year they really only had one person that they had to repeatedly ask, and it was at Fun Valley. Somebody that was smoking. They said every place else that, you know, a staff member would simply approach somebody and say, we don't allow smoking inside the facility, and usually that took care of the problem. So it seems like it's already working basically with signage and reminders for the most part at our gated facilities, which is where we're going to have the largest congregation of people anyway. So.
So how would you see the enforcement of the regulation occurring?
I think beyond signage, you know, we would, I would instruct my staff that, you know, if they see somebody smoking, just to remind them, just to, you know, we're tobacco free in the parks. You know, my staff's not trained to, you know, do any sort of confrontation or anything like that. So just a simple reminder. If we do get repeat violations, you know, the same person's in the same park doing, you know, then we might engage one of the community police officers to maybe approach that individual. But again, in a non-threatening way. You know, we don't. I don't have park rangers. We're not going to be out actively looking for it. You know, I can't speak for Chief Heitschmidt, but I'm sure he's not going to send people out patrolling the parks looking for people smoking. I think just as we see it, or if we get complaints, then we can address it that way. So.
If I understand your comments correctly, Paul, a person could be cited.
Good.
Yeah.
By a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Not saying that's what we intend to do, but it could be.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Had you looked, and I know you referenced, excuse me, talking with peers at a recent conference.
Yeah.
Can you give us some feel for other communities, especially in this state?
Most of the cities that I've seen within Kansas have all gone a policy or regulation style. I have talked to a couple across the country that have gone with an actual ordinance. Those were generally part of a larger approach to go completely tobacco-free on all publicly owned facilities. It was a much bigger endeavor. You know, they were generally joint. You know, I talked with the assistant director of Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte, North Carolina, and they did a big push countywide to do tobacco-free in all publicly owned facilities, all parks. So it was really kind of a joint effort. But for the most part, it was really done at the policy or park rule level across the state. So.
Okay.
Okay.
won't guarantee it's my last.
That's
But the language that we have in our packet, I take it that's brand new language, and that's what you're proposing or suggesting you would utilize for the regulation in this tobacco-free. Okay.
Yeah, and according to the city ordinance, if this is the direction we go, I will post this language on our website. I'll post it here at City Hall, at Public Works, at my facility, to help get the word out. So.
And have we, other than the gated areas, have we had any disallowance of smoking or tobacco product use in any of our park areas prior to this?
The dog park is another one, and it's gated, but it's not a HUD rec facility. Also, the skate park is one that we have.
Signage posted?
On the rules, on the skate park rules,
Mhm.
it is listed, no smoking. And I believe it's smoking, not tobacco use, so. But.
And issues of any kind at either of those locations?
Never been an issue at the dog park. We do pick up quite a few cigarette butts from the skate park.
Skate park?
Yeah.
I mean, the school districts went several years ago to no tobacco use, like at Gowan Stadium or any of those activities. And I assume that has gone relatively well. Seems to. So it's not that it's a new idea.
Yeah, and there is kind of an interesting twist to this. Is I have a handful of employees that are tobacco users, so it will impact them as well. So that's something that I'm going to work on internally. Is how do we address that when I have people that are in the park 8 hours a day, at office in the park, or doing maintenance in the park 8 hours a day. How do we address that? And
Justin, if such an administrative regulation were to be approved by, is that an approval of the council, or we have the authority to do that, and when would that be implemented then?
There, in the ordinance, city manager and I do have the authority to make that, so it does not require any action by city council. Obviously, because of the nature of this and because of the presentation that was made, we wanted to report back and get feedback, get input from council. As far as an effective date, I would work with the health department as well as communities with care as far as getting signage and do we want to do some promoting and some things before it goes effective. So I would think around the first of the year or something, or we might. I know there are some dates. I think there's one in November, the smoke out, and then there's another one in the spring. So we might try to piggyback on a well-known date as well. But being an authority or being a regulation, really we can kind of pick that effective date.
Well, I think for the benefit of the Reno County communities that care, I think you can clearly see this morning that we're trying to go down the same path as you all are. Hopefully you see and recognize some of the slight differences, but how the administrative regulation could work to address your issues of tobacco-free in our city parks. So, with that, perhaps there may be a few of you that may want to make some comments. We have quite a contingency here this morning, but I don't know if there are any designated individuals that would like to speak briefly to how many may that be? Three? Okay, that's fine. That's great. So please come forward and please introduce yourselves.
I'm Taylor Lang.
I'm Destiny Brigman-Reed. I'm a junior at Hutch High.
Thank you.
And I'm Abby Pemberton, and I'm also a junior at Hutchinson
Thank
High
you.
School. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, well, first I want to thank Justin Combs for coming out and speaking about the administrative regulation. And I also want to thank the council for giving us an opportunity to express our concerns about it, because we do have a few concerns.
So us three, we did do some research on an administrative regulation and how it's different from an ordinance. And for those of you in the audience that don't know, basically an administrative regulation is like a rule, and whereas an ordinance is more permanent.
And there's a few differences, and the three that we noticed, that the enforcement is not carried out to the same extent. And it also can be repealed at any moment. And after we put in all this work, we really don't want it to be repealed because at any time, whether that be like days, weeks, months, years, the park director and the city manager can just take it away.
With tobacco-free parks, we want to put in place a safe place for our generation and future generations to have a healthy place to live and work. And with a regulation, it can be repealed at any time, and that would no longer be put in place for future generations to have a safe place to live, work, and play.
Yeah. The fact that it could be thrown away anytime kind of scares us because we've worked 10 long months on this project and we'd hate to see it all go to waste.
And we're thinking about some of the obstacles that the council might have, and we're thinking about this meeting and how it's going to go, and we kind of highlight some of the concerns that you guys might have. And one of them that we thought about was how the council has to go through all these like negative comments. And we really wanted to show the council that tobacco-free parks are important to a lot of people throughout Hutchinson.
Okay, so on Saturday night, we started a form that people could fill out, kind of showing their support for a tobacco-free ordinance. And so when I went to bed on Saturday night, we had 14 signatures. Sunday night, we had 164 signatures. And Monday night, it was up to 313. Now, currently, we have 343 supporters, which happened in just 60 hours.
And these are people who want our parks and to be tobacco-free, and they want that to carry through. They want to make sure that this is ensured, that we will have the tobacco-free parks, and that it will be carried out to the extent of an ordinance.
Abby and I were selected nationally to go to a Truth Initiative Summit in Washington, D.C., which we attended this summer to further this project as well as learn more information about tobacco use.
And I was listening to Justin, and I realized that we have common goals. We really want to do education, and something that when we went to DC that we learned a lot about was tobacco education, and we are pretty much professionals at that. So we would really, like to work with Justin, work with the city with this education piece, and we can take that beyond just like the city of Hutch. We can take that in the high school. We can take that in the middle schools. Start those younger kids that are in 5th and 6th grade. Start telling them that tobacco use is not cool, and hopefully with the tobacco-free parks and making sure that's an ordinance, we can make sure that's not the social norm anymore in Hutchinson. Okay. All right, and I agree that the golf area should not be included because that is something really hard, and if we include that, that is going to be a lot of pushback. So I think it is best to leave that out. And also, he mentioned that the skate park is tobacco-free, but really that's where we found a lot of our cigarettes. We cleaned up the cigarettes for, I think, 5 minutes, but then there was so much left that I was like, okay, let's do 10 minutes. But then there was so much left, I was like, come on, let's just pick up more just for fun, which is really weird. But it shows that there are some things in place, and there are rules in place, but they're not being carried through. And I think with an ordinance, that would be better enforced and better followed.
Also, when we put up the website for signing if they are in favor of this ordinance, we also had numerous amount of comments from people with family with like ill children that have struggles to avoid the secondhand tobacco, as well as physicians who see the effects of this every day. So we kind of have a wide range of supporters.
Anyway, and also, I heard Justin and the council mention that you guys are looking for a good day to reveal this, and the one in spring is called Kick Butts Day, and I love Kick Butts Day. I think this year it's on March 15th or March 17th, somewhere in there. It changes every year, and it would be a really good day to reveal this and have it be like a good celebration. Anyway, okay, so in conclusion, we really hope that you guys pass this as an ordinance because we've worked so hard on this and we've put in so much time and effort, and as high schoolers it means a lot to us that we've done this and we've learned so much, and we've gone to travel nationwide and we've asked what they think, and they said to go for an ordinance. So we really hope that together we can work together and use the education piece and get an ordinance in Hutchinson Parks. Thank you guys.
We feel that with the ordinance, it's the best opportunity. And with some of the trainings that we have gone to with CADCA and Truth, they told us to always pursue the best opportunity. And we feel like an ordinance, not a regulation, would give us the best opportunity and the best results.
We're open to any questions as well.
Well, let me first of all ask, are you all on the debate team?
Forensics or one of these.
Or forensics? Yes, right. So you did a good job. Thank you very much.
I
I can appreciate the passion that you have, and certainly it's reflective here, and the extensive work and research that you continually do. Your initial comments that you are concerned about the likelihood that the administrative regulations would be removed or eliminated, I seriously doubt that. I just do not see that occurring. That I think the city council, the governing body, and our senior management staff certainly take very serious what you're talking about. And there are slight differences between the ordinance versus the administrative regulations, that I get that. My tendency is to lean toward the administrative regulation approach initially. Certainly, as time goes on, this can be evaluated and assessed, and if we are compelled or believe that an ordinance might want to be considered, that certainly, but this is a first step, I think. And I just want to assure you individually that I'm certainly a strong proponent of the approach and the position that you're taking on this, but my tendencies are to lean toward the administrative regulation approach at this point.
How would you envision this being enforced if it were an ordinance as opposed to a regulation?
Everyone looked at me. All right. So many other cities have done fines, and some cities have not. There's something that you said that I was like, a lot of the cities actually have done ordinances rather than the policies, including like South Hutch and all the ones that we've worked with. And South Hutch does have a fine, and other cities don't. Per se, in Hutchinson, I mean, it goes either way. We can do it without a fine or with a fine. Either way really works. The way that I envisioned it would maybe be like a small fine if it is like repetitive. So maybe you could start with telling them, hey, you got to go, and that would be like the park goer saying, hey, you're not supposed to be smoking here. So at first it would be self-enforced, which would not include the police department. But we also, if it does have to include the police department, we have a letter of support from the sheriff in your packets. So that works out really well.
Okay, but he's not out patrolling to arrest somebody. In your packet originally, you included several samples, and 3 of them are policies versus an ordinance. And I think the reality is an ordinance can be removed too. It can be repealed. I don't know. It's a longer time frame. What is it, Paul? Maybe 2 weeks?
No, you can repeal it at the very next council meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an ordinance per se is not a forever deal, okay? So I'm with John. I am much more in favor of doing an administrative regulation. I think it's more enforceable. I think it's more logical. And I think it addresses the issue that you are trying to get to. And I'm a former smoker, so believe me, I know how hard it is.
I tend to be on the same page. I'm also encouraged that there is some teeth to it. I wasn't sure if there was or there wasn't. I was glad to hear that there is some teeth to it. I think it's a great first step, personally. I don't think there's anything that we would do, how do I want to word that, within the regulation if we were to pursue an ordinance later, if this didn't work out, so to speak, we would still have to hang the signs. We would still have to do all these things. That's all going to be implemented in this regulation piece. I'm kind of taking the approach of let's see how this works first, and then if it's warranted, then pursuing it to a higher level, to an ordinance or whatever that may be. I'm not sure what that looks like, but that's where I'm falling right now.
I'm sure you realize if it hadn't been for your coming to the council a month ago, 5 weeks ago, we wouldn't be talking about it today, even in terms of a policy. So I would hope that all of you are feeling proud of what you've accomplished. I don't think that not having an ordinance is at all a failure on the 10 months of work that you've done. I see it just the opposite. I think that coming to this point and it being proposed that we have a regulation is a testament to the 10 months worth of work that you've done. I'll make it unanimous. I think if we can accomplish what you proposed last month by regulation, then why make it a law? We have enough laws as it is. And as David just mentioned, we obviously have the wherewithal to issue a citation and pursue levying a fine even with regulation. I would encourage you all, and I don't want vigilantes wanting me, but I mean, you might follow up in 6 months after this goes into effect and take a look at the skate park or take a look at this area and do what you did already, going through and seeing how many
Policing.
butts there are to be picked
Yeah.
up. You know, you might choose to come back to us and say, hey, we just wanted to let you know, or you might be pleasantly surprised with
Yeah.
what you find or don't find, as the case may be.
And
So, again,
Yeah.
good job on what you've done and the work you put into it, because you brought this forward and you're making it happen.
I would add on to that, I would be interested to hear from Justin as well, our eyes and ears in the park,
As to
to
how.
report down the road as well. Are those butts at the same level? Are they not? And so on and so forth. But very,
Yeah.
very good point. This is not in any form or fashion any kind of defeat. It wasn't even on the radar. And so now we have, or will have, excuse me, a regulation in place that will go towards it. And if it's inadequate, then we can address that at a later time. Thank you again.
All right, thank you again very
Thank you.
much, all of you. Continued
Yeah.
good studies and bright futures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as the agenda noted here, there's no action required today.
No.
Is that correct, Mr. Deerdoff?
We'll proceed with final implementation of this, and I think maybe coordinate on the date if they want to look at that March date
Okay.
Yeah.
or sooner.
I was going to say, I'm open to sooner, maybe
Yeah.
if you want to have a grand reveal, some sort of a ribbon
Right.
cutting
Well,
or
yeah,
something
I mean,
on a
the
big date.
November
But
date
why not go ahead
probably
and,
is a little too soon.
that
but-
might be premature, but
Yeah, I mean, that
first of
was
the
what,
year.
the Great American Smokeout
Yeah.
Day is what it
Well-
always, I mean,
We'll coordinate that.
Yeah, we'll coordinate that with communities of care as well as the health department and
yeah,
how we're going
you
to roll
know.
that out. So.
But if
and-
it's on, might as well, the sooner the better, let's
Yeah.
get it rolling.
And I would certainly hope that they take the knowledge that they have gained and work with fellow high school students on smoking cessation efforts and things like that at the high school and junior high. So,
Indeed.
anyway,
Indeed.
All right. With that, thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
Good job, Justin. Thank you.
yeah,
good.
thank you.
Yeah. All right, I believe we're ready for next item.
Sewer bid.
Item 7B, consider bid award for sanitary sewer collection improvements.
Jeff, we want you to be as passionate.
Yes,
That's
they
a tough
are.
act to follow. Did a very good job, so. Again, Jeff Peterson with the Engineering Department, and today I'm presenting the approval and recommendation for the sanitary sewer collection improvements project that was opened last week. This project actually repairs 17,000 feet of 8 to 15-inch sanitary sewer, and then also 1,800 feet of 27-inch sanitary sewer. And this is usually the point where I give you a map where the locations are, but I didn't do it this way this time. I put together actually just some slides of showing a few things that would get repaired in this, so you guys have a little more background in that. So we'll kind of go that way.
And these are always so aesthetically appealing.
Well, yeah. I tried to keep them fairly clean.
These are fairly clean.
Fairly clean.
Yeah, after breakfast, before lunch.
These were actually after they were cleaned. This is what the city does on an ongoing basis to inspect the city's lines. This is a location where the joints have pulled apart, and you can see there's roots that are growing in it. This may be a place where they'll get cleaned again, and then they'll line through this portion, actually. So we don't have a kind of an open conduit into the existing sanitary.
What's the diameter on that one, do you know?
I was going to say.
Say that again?
Yeah.
Diameter?
I would guess it's probably 8 inch.
It's an 8?
It's hard to tell with some of these.
Yeah.
The zoomed in,
Because it's-
whatever, yeah.
Things look a lot bigger than they actually are in person. Of course, up here, it looks like it's 25-inch,
Right.
but it's not, so. But that's one location. Here's a location where we've actually had part of the vitrified clay pipe or the sewer line collapse,
Fall
and
apart.
so we're actually having dirt and other things come into the pipe. It hasn't per se failed, but if we had like a large rain event, a lot of infiltration, that might cause that to collapse and
Cave in and block it totally.
cave in and block it. And what will happen here in these situations, they'll actually cut out the piece of pipe, put in a new piece of pipe, and then they'll put the liner back through it. So it's kind of a seamless pipe again afterwards. So
When you say pipe, is this a cast iron? Is it a plastic product? Is it a?
which pipe? This pipe or the new stuff?
Well,
The new one.
yes.
This is actually vitrified clay. It's
A clay.
clay pipe, it's a brick type
Gotcha.
material.
Okay.
That's kind of the original sewers were put in that way, and they've been around
Long time.
forever. I mean, since we started having sewers. What they would do actually is put in a PVC pipe in that location, and then they'd make sure that that was connected well, and then they'd line through it.
Okay.
So I have just one more. But this is one, it's not as big as the others, but you can see that it's like the bell of a pipe. A portion of it is cracked and broke. So it can let water in and water out of the sewer in those locations. So in the long run, this could become a bigger problem. And we'd have a collapse, or we'd end up being more like the situation before, where a lot of dirt and things would come into the sewer line and maybe cause a void, that something would collapse and break the pipe. So this one may be small enough where they just line past it, not replace it per se. So, but all those provisions are kind of taken care of in the project. So after that, that's kind of the pictures I have for this. But I just wanted to let you know that we had 6 bids for this project was open last week. The low bid was $1,660,906.60 from Utility Solutions LLC, a contractor from Bayshore, Kansas, and that included the base bid and we had a few alternatives with
Alternates.
that. The engineering department and the utility department discussed kind of how we wanted to proceed with this, and we wanted to get as much lining going forward as we could. So we are recommending that the base bid, which is primarily the lining and point repairs, and alternate number 1, which is again just spot point repairs, and then alternative number 2, which is repairing some of the existing services that are in really bad shape, be accepted. So that would bring the contract cost to $1,458,140.60. If you look, all the options were actually pretty much underneath the engineer's estimate, so I think that bodes well for the number of bids we had and the interest in the project. The completion date of the project is November 18th of next year, of 2018. And the construction costs will actually be funded through the sewer reserve funds. So kind of the stuff that we budget for doing these types of repairs going forward. The city has not worked with Utility Solutions LLC, but our consultants, AG consultants who prepared the plans, are working with them at a couple locations, and they have provided a recommendation letter saying that they have the ability to take this type of project on, and they're doing 2 projects that are about similar nature and similar scope, repairs and lining also. So
Do you get a comfort level with them?
yes, we
Okay.
do. So it's not to say that there won't be.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is kind of a difficult difficult project, because it's in areas where we don't have a lot of access, some of the repairs, and before we have to we'll do the point repairs first, and then they'll line through it. They don't need to get into those hard to get places when they do the lining, because they can go from manhole to manhole, but there's some backyards and easements that are
Right.
fairly tight that we'll take care of, that will have to be taken account of when they go do their repairs. So
Okay, so in essence, they do this underground.
correct.
They aren't going to be digging up.
Well,
the
they are
street-
they'll be digging up the portions where, like that one where the void is, and putting the
Uh-huh.
pipe in. So they'll put
Okay.
in like a 10-foot section per se.
Okay,
And they'll repair that whole manhole to manhole section, and then they can go in and just install the lining from the upstream manhole to the downstream manhole. So they won't have to get into people's backyards at every
yeah, they're not
location.
going to be trenching
And they'll
up the
actually
streets.
come back in, and they have a little machine or robot that goes in and goes internally, cuts open the
For the tap.
services,
Yeah,
and gets them reestablished again, so.
okay.
Jeff, I'm just curious, as kind of a sidebar to the city's policy and their bidding process, that when you get into a project like this or other projects here, is that there's a determined completion date, and if that completion date is not completed, are there penalties
There
that
is.
you write in, or how do you approach that?
With most all the projects we have what we'd call liquidated damages.
Liquidated damage.
And it's to recover the costs that might be incurred by the city, having an inspector out there on site and those types of things. Some of our projects don't have quite as many, people aren't affected due to the projects. And so we take that into consideration. But this one is directly dealing with some of the people and public. And we're trying to make the sewer system a lot more maintenance-free and last a lot longer. So we do have those provisions in there that we have used in the past. You may not have heard of all that. But,
Yeah, right.
But we do use them
But liquidated
periodically.
damage, I've heard that terminology before, sure, so, okay.
So
Okay,
anyway,
one more question. So
Sure.
in essence, when this is going on, unless somebody has to have their sewer dug up and the pipe replaced, people are not going to see any
they won't
shutdown in service.
Well, they'll have a temporary shutdown of probably a couple hours. They'll be
Okay.
notified a day or so beforehand.
And how do we do that?
There's handbills, and they go
Okay.
door to door on that.
Okay.
And that's a requirement of the contractor.
Okay, they have to do that.
Yes, they do.
All right.
Because there'll be a time period where they'd have limited use. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
limited use of their sewer while they're doing the lining portion and getting that cured and then getting the robot back in and getting the services opened. It's a pretty common practice. We're not the only one that does this type. There's a number
Yeah.
of communities all over Kansas that do this. And
Sounds like
and-
the least invasive way of
Right,
yeah.
right. I
doing
mean-
and there's
yeah.
areas where they'll actually have to do bypass pumping. Well, they'll have to pump from an upstream manhole to a downstream manhole because we have enough flow in there. We can't back it up for that time period. So,
Okay.
so there's those provisions as well.
It's probably more than I wanted to know, but
Well,
I'm curious.
One of my own, to harken back to an earlier conversation, this may involve Brian as well. The rates that we're raising to help offset the costs and to help build our fund, are these going towards, will that be going towards preventative maintenance? This is repair work that we're talking about now. I'm assuming an ounce of prevention, more than a pound of cure or whatever. Will that money?
It's preventative.
This is kind of preventative too, because it eliminates the need to have to go in and actually
So they're
physically
really
dig
the
up the
same.
holes and
Yeah.
replace
Okay.
the whole line. So this is maintenance per se,
Okay.
and extending the life of our facilities that we have in place. So a lot of them are like in alleys that have buildings right next to them and things like that. So it's not a. It's in order to, if we had to dig them up, it would cost somewhat more and inconvenience people for a lot longer time.
Well, I guess that's why I was driving at. This is a $1.4 million project for what we're talking about here. Is that, do they coincide? Do they dovetail? Are we talking about the same type of work?
I mean, the city itself does cleaning and televising to try to verify the locations, and the areas that the city can fix, we do go in and actually repair those short locations. We don't have the equipment to do the lining of the whole line and that type of work. But,
Right, and these aren't like water pipes, so they're not pressurized or anything like that.
Correct.
So they're working, maybe just not.
yeah,
at,
these
at
are all
capacity.
They're actually in service
Yeah.
right now. So.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay. Yeah,
So
I may be
though
confusing the two as
something
well,
could
but-
happen to where that causes a problem.
Right. Okay, I think I get it. Thank you.
What sort of extension of life to the areas that are going to be worked on will we, should we expect to see?
Well, I think.
We're talking about 20 years, 50 years?
Well, I think you could say 30 to 50 years, and they'll be monitored because we do televise them. We're trying to get on it every 5-year cycle. So.
Will that be on the Hutch channel?
We can arrange that.
And we actually have.
That'd be a good filler.
We actually have lined in the past some of our larger diameter lines, and we have some more coming up. But I believe 2008 we lined 4,000 feet of 33-inch line that goes down Severance Avenue, and those were bypassed at the time. So it's trying to keep our system viable as we go forward without having to do a lot of. I mean, it's not inexpensive, but it's cheaper than doing the work if we had to
Than digging it up
conventional-
and replacing, yeah.
Doing the whole thing from scratch, yeah.
Just a couple technical things. You used the word point repair, and in the information you gave us, talked about trenchless point repair. What is point repair?
Well, the pointlet repair is like where they go in and add in a new piece of pipe
Okay.
if we're gonna do it by the conventional dig, and there's some of that in here.
Mm-hmm.
The trenchless point repair is a different one where they actually go in and put a kind of a sleeve in that area internally.
So it's kind of, again.
So it's kind of the same.
Same thing,
same thing.
a lining, but it's just for a small
But it's
portion.
restricted just to the area where we have
Okay.
damage. And that was one of the things that had been budgeted, and we just wanted to see how that works and how good those,
How it holds up.
how it holds up over
how it
time.
performs,
So,
yeah.
so
okay.
that's kind of a work in progress, kind of seeing how that would help us out going forward too. That'd be
And-
another option we have.
And the service taps, that's where a residence or commercial
Comes
line
into the sewer.
connects into the city, the city
Correct.
main.
And I had some pictures of those, but they weren't good enough to really show up here. But some of
So-
those have cracked and settled.
So that will be excavation.
That will be
and-
excavation
and-
right at the service
Okay.
main. So,
Yeah.
but we didn't do that for all of them. There's a number of them that are in really good shape. There's a number of them that are in. There's really no structural issues wrong with them, so we didn't do those. But sometimes we get root growth down the existing services. I mean, it's the private side of things, and that can impede and have clogs for each
For the
resident or
resident, yeah.
customer. So.
Mhm, mhm. So the owner, property owner's not responsible for the tap? Or
They
the
are-
condition of the tap,
Th-
or?
They are on the new services and on the other services. We're just fixing these right now because they'll be most of the ones that we're doing would be an immediate problem. We're just getting the tap. They still may have problems in their line, for instance, root growth or a collapse or
right,
some other
okay.
things. So typically we don't, and that's why we didn't select add alternate number 3 because that repaired some additional services at this point. So. All good questions.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
So anyway, recommend at the base bid along with add alternate 1 and add alternate number 2 to Utility Solutions in the amount of $1,458,140.60.
Okay, Jeff, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
We have a motion.
I will move to approve awarding the project base bid with add alternate 1 and add alternate 2 to Utility Solutions LLC in the amount of $1,458,140.60, subject to the compliance with all legal requirements, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dayline?
Yes. All right, next item.
Item 7C, snow plan presentation.
Well, of any subject that has more public opinion, this is probably the one. There are a lot of viewpoints on the right ways for snowplow. So
Yeah. Good
with
morning.
that, good morning, sir.
Morning.
My name's Brian Clinton. I'm the Director of Public Works, and I'd like to introduce a few folks. You guys can come on up. We've got Craig Lumen, who is our Street Superintendent, Cecil Weibel, who's a Street Supervisor, and Richard Buller, who's a Street Supervisor. And they're here today to talk to you about our preparations for the upcoming winter weather season. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
I came onto the street department in 2013. I've been with the utilities and with the city since 1991, for a little bit of background. But it's been very enjoyable being over the street department, and with Brian's guidance, we've changed a few things over the past few years and how we're looking at approaching things. But to start off, wanted to cover the historical weather as far as snowfall that we've had in the past few years. And although the screen's not going to change, I might wait and see if that's ever going to happen. For you. Where? Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. I thought someone was taking care of it. The side arrow. Okay. Well, I guess all you guys will know how to do it.
That's right.
Okay. This is the averages for over the past 10 years. And as you can see in 2013, that's the year when I came in the street department. We had a significant amount of snowfall that year, but the averages have been staying around 16 inches. Down at the bottom on the graph, that's the snowfall that we've had during the past 3 years, as it suggests, and there again in February, and that was in 14, we had a significant amount also. So hopefully this coming February doesn't show the same kind of historical information. This is information from the National Weather Service, and basically what that's showing is their prediction on what we may look for in our area for precipitation, and we're right on the borderline to having equal chances of an average precipitation with winter, with a possible chance of less than 33%. That'll have a less than 33% chance of the same averages. So depends on if you're a farmer, I guess, whether you'd like to have that extra moisture or not.
True.
If there's no questions on that, I'll turn it over to Cecil, and he'll finish off some more.
Thank you.
Morning.
Morning.
Cecil Well, been with the city for going almost 20 years now.
Great.
All that
Wow.
time in the street department. So,
Thank you.
we each year we like to start off. We've already gone through and we start doing some prep work on all of our equipment. We have the capacity to store 900 tons of salt on hand, and having the salt plant here in Hutch also helps when we have those big winters. So we can usually replenish that very quickly. We're budgeting this year for 2018. We're budgeting to have 45,000 in additional salt purchase if needed, and we are currently storing 6,000 gallons of calcium chloride on hand, which helps lower the working temperature of the salt. Also this year, and Richard will discuss it a little further, we're adding another containment to make our own salt brine. One of the other activities we do is we have training ahead of time for all of our staff, classroom and driving skills. And John got to be on our driving skills this year.
Don't tell him my time. Pretty embarrassing.
So,
You have a training program for the rest of us as well?
it is open. We will let you guys come on in and try it out. We set up a course. You can see in this little picture here, we set up a course every year with our guys to kind of simulate what they would be going through out on the streets. Of course, it's not snowing at the time, but so they have to go through and it tests their skills driving the bigger trucks than normal. Most of our guys are used to driving the dump trucks and stuff anyways, but as you can see on some of our trucks, I mean, they are a 10-foot plow, which adds 4 or 5 foot to the front of the truck and about another 2 foot to the side of the truck. So the guys have to get used to being able to drive that. So it does take up some extra room. We try to get them out and get them trained on that. We also have them drive the entire, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Also, when we get all the equipment ready, we check all the trucks out, plows, rubbers, lights, all of our dump trucks get the spreaders and plows attached into them, make sure everything's up and working. They hang for 6 to 8 months out of the year. We have to make sure everything's working once we reattach it. We also calibrate all the equipment. We are shooting to put down 250 to 300 pounds of salt per lane mile when we're out running. Now, it sounds like a lot, but when you really take that over what you're looking at, it's about, foot by foot square, you're actually looking at about 12 to 13 little grains of salt. It's not, but it does, once it starts to melt and activate and creates its own brine, that's when it starts working. But ahead of time, we take all the vehicles out, and the guys have to calibrate all of them, make sure they're all working properly. We have, there's 680 lane miles approximately in the city of Hutch. 330 of those is covered with our primary snow routes. We have 8 routes. One of those is dedicated to going around the schools, so ahead of time before all the schools go. The other 7 routes are primarily our collectors and arterial streets. And our primary goal is to try to make sure we have everybody within the city covered about 4 blocks from a road that's plowed. We try to get it so they don't have to drive through plowed snow and all the residential without getting to something they can get out onto the streets. But our primary goal is to make sure we have the arterials and all that ready for emergency vehicles to be able to get around where they need to go, is our primary goal. I think, any questions on that? Anything I've covered?
Quick question for clarification on the map down in the legend section. There's the various colors in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that in chronological order? Is that the way you work them? You say?
No. What a lot of our routes do is we've got we try to call all the trucks in at once, and Route 1 and 2 actually work together. We because they kind of go up a certain route and come around. We tandem the trucks. Those 2 trucks come in and they'll plow together. Yeah. And the back truck and the plow will actually be throwing the salt. So that way they can run together. We can open the highway and Main Street are the first 2, and 30th are wide streets.
Makes sense.
Route 3 and 4 are the same thing. They kind of run the route in reverse, and they run together to help widen that street so we can get that open as quickly as possible. It takes approximately, depending on the snow event, approximately 3 hours for us to run the route all the way through one time.
What, one route?
Oh, well,
Or-
as soon as all the routes get started, it takes us between 3 and 4
okay.
hours to get that done.
To get that done,
in
okay.
normal snow. If it's a heavy snow where we're plowing more than salting, because we'll try to get as much snow off before we start throwing the salt, they may have to go back and plow more than once to get that open before we do, and that would up that time.
Okay.
Question related to equipment. As you guys assess your operations and so on, condition of equipment, are we keeping pace with the conditions of the equipment and replacement and so on?
Yeah, I mean, we've been scheduling to have at least one truck replaced every year for the next 5, I believe. So we are keeping newer equipment. I mean, to give you guys some background, some of the equipment I started on probably wouldn't have made it another year.
Okay.
We did have some really old equipment, and the city has really turned that around in the last 5 to 10 years. We've always had.
Do we purchase that or do we lease that?
All of our equipment, I believe, is purchased for snow and salt.
Okay.
I mean, we purchased the dump trucks as a package deal. So the dump truck comes with a spreader and a plow. So when we exchange those out, when they get sold off, usually the spreader and plow goes with it, and we'll buy a new one to replace it. We did go to some stuff this year, some conferences we're looking at, trying to maybe see what we can do to maybe make the equipment better as we move forward, but we're not quite there yet on that. We're still using what we've been using for years, which is a rubber plow. The big plows in the front of the trucks have a rubber base on the bottom that squeegees the snow off. It works well. There are some stuff out there that might work a little better, but it's more cost. So we're currently looking into what we can and can't do with that stuff.
Does that equipment, does it have a multi-use, multi-purpose? I mean, I know it's geared for snow removal, but is it ever used for
We
any
actually
other?
do use the spreaders. We have used the spreaders like for doing alley work and stuff. When you want to put
Okay.
down a fine layer of sand or dirt.
It lends itself to that
Yes.
because okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The plows themselves are pretty much just. for
That's
snow
pretty
removal.
much where they
Yeah.
belong. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the spreaders we can use for some other purposes.
Interesting.
The state has made some additions to some of theirs that we've looked at,
Uh-huh.
where instead of a spinner on the back, it's a catch and puts it off to one side. Like if you wanted to do shoulder work,
Oh,
you could string dirt out on one side of the road and be able to do work that way. So,
okay, yeah.
Okay, appreciate that explanation.
any other questions?
I guess I had one other as well, and briefly, and I don't know if it's going to be in one of the other subjects or whatever, but what I've noticed recently, and I say recently, but probably in the last 5 years or whatever, there's a lot of emphasis on like pre-treatment, that brine. So, the radar shows it's coming. Could you briefly take me kind of through the process?
Yeah. Well, Richard's going to touch on that.
And that's where,
Yeah.
how about that, how about that segue, right?
Okay.
Hey, thank you so much.
My name is Richard Buller. I'm a supervisor in the street department. If there's been any moisture in the past 4 hours, and the temperature is going to get within 3 degrees of freezing, we have somebody out checking the roads and the bridge decks.
Got it.
We have a temperature gun so we can see exactly what the temperature of the deck is. If it's getting close, we call people in. If we see it coming, we will pre-treat with brine, and just to create that layer so it doesn't stick to the pavement. The city uses salt brine and calcium chloride to pre-treat the roads and pre-wet the salt. We currently have the capacity to store 6,000 gallons of calcium chloride. And just last month, we constructed a second liquid containment area, and we're going to have the capacity to store 6,000 gallons of salt brine as well. The city is currently taking bids for a brine generator to be self-sufficient. Last year, we were getting brine from a company out south of South Hutchinson that they were disposing of drilling fluids, and they were displacing salt brine in salt caverns. And so we don't know if they're going to be in business next year. Who knows? Okay. So we're trying to be proactive and be self-sufficient. This diagram here shows the effectiveness of salt at given temperatures. We use salt brine and salt down to around 15 degrees. And then after that, if it gets any colder, we use calcium chloride to pre-wet the salt. We can use the calcium chloride down to around 15 below. The reason we start with the salt brine, number one, it's cheap. We get it we can make it between 3 and 8 cents a gallon. The calcium chloride is $1.25 a gallon.
Oh.
So it gets expensive pretty quick. Last year, we used 13,000 gallons of salt brine on the road. This is a good example of why we pre-wet the salt. These are grains of salt that were put on a block of ice. One was wetted before they put it down, and the other one is just dry. And that's after 20 minutes at 5 degrees. So
Why?
the science is there.
I'm just curious. Well, why does the wetted salt work so much better?
The brine is actually what melts the ice. It's not the salt itself. The salt has to go into a solution. It has to be a mixture.
Okay.
Yeah, before it does its thing.
The pre-wetting essentially kickstarts the process.
So the dry salt has to melt a little bit to
Right,
create
has
a brine.
to make water, and for it to be effective, and
So it takes time to do that, and then
exactly.
it's- okay.
If you pre-wet it, it goes much quicker.
Gotcha.
And I believe if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
And I don't know if this is a question for you guys or maybe Brian or Jeff, but what impact on our storm sewer system and where that eventually goes to in terms of all the salt and brine and whatnot that we put on our streets?
That's a question.
What environmental impact or
I
what?
cannot answer.
Well, I think that is a good question, and it's a question that has begun being asked in larger areas than the city of Hutchinson. But that's why it's important for us to calibrate our equipment like we're doing so that we know how much salt we're putting down. We're not just going out there blindly throwing down, maybe 1,000 pounds a mile, way more than what we need. So the whole point of us calibrating the equipment is so that we're putting down what we need to melt the storm, and we'd be able to explain that to any kind of environmental regulators.
I mean, this goes to the rivers where it ends up,
It does.
correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Everything that drains down our storm sewers ends up in
In the river.
either Cow Creek or
Yeah.
and eventually the Arkansas River. So yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
I've got more of a policy question, and I appreciate so much this background here. It's very, very helpful to understand our snow removal program. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I know individually I've probably had a dozen or so phone calls over the weekends from citizens concerned about, very, very irate, quite candidly, about why this street and that particular street wasn't. And I've tried to respond as with my limited knowledge, but what is our policy? Do we want to, or do we refer those kinds of calls to any individual, or do we just try to deal with them ourselves?
You mean to call
Because it
about a
has happened.
specific
Yeah, to call a
location?
specific phone number or
Yeah.
individual. I hate
Well,
to suggest that, but
I know I
that's
get
tough
a lot
one.
of those phone calls,
Yeah.
and typically they're probably on a weekend or
Yep,
night
they are
or
on a
whatever the
weekend.
case might
Right.
be. And I think probably the most important thing is to understand our policy. And if it's somebody calling about the street in front of their house in a residential area and when are the plows coming, in some
They're not.
cases,
They're not.
we're not.
They're not.
Right.
And we're basically collector, arterial. There are some residential streets, if probably that are more collectors, I guess, that are on our list. So there are some residential streets that get plowed because they're a connecting piece to and I don't know if I can think of some examples.
Well, or
of
even
that.
getting to a school, I think
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
heard mentioned
Getting to
that.
schools,
If it's a
those
neighborhood
kind of
school,
things,
it
but-
might-
There's we have one of the routes on the map, was for the schools, around the school. To see if I can get back to it.
Which by default, you'd have to get into some of the
I think
neighborhoods.
it's-
in order
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
there.
I'm not sure, but I think it's,
It's hard to see, it's the one in black.
yeah, it's one in
Black.
black, so it's on the right-hand side, right-hand column, the third one down, I think it is.
It's not a route that's gonna look like a long continuous route because
It's spotty.
it's just going around.
Those routes are hit. Typically, we're not going to touch those while school's going on, but it does make a difference what John's talking about, where you're talking about, because we don't do the residential streets, but we do around schools, and there is also those streets that would make it up, like Tyler, I believe, going up to Wiley School, 23rd that comes off of Monroe that goes west toward Wiley School, and we do all around the schools. Every one of the schools, we cover the perimeter of the school. So there's there's always around the school. And if it's not right on an arterial collector road, like Avenue A, for example, it's right on an arterial road. Well, we'll do the perimeter, so we'll do Madison Street, B Street, and Monroe Street. We cover around the school itself. Probably one of the things also that might have changed over the past, I'm going to say 3 years, is one of the things we've done internally, and it was mentioned before that when the temperature gets down to within 3 degrees of freezing, we call someone in place. For years, the way that it was approached is the police department always has people out, always has officers out, and really the reliance was them calling in when they determined there was an issue. I don't really know the background of all that. I just know in 2013 we had a heavy snowfall event, like I mentioned, and it was like 3:30 in the morning, and I got up and went into South Hutch. There's probably 3 inches of snow on the ground. Don't know if there's miscommunication or what, but that process there, we hadn't been contacted yet, so I'd contacted the police to say, hey, what's going on? You know, I haven't got a call yet. Have we missed something, or you know, whatever it may be? And so we kind of chose to take a different approach, and there again, that's when we started the policy of we have our people come in advance of when we think there's a potential of freezing, or where there be anything show up on bridge decks or something, to kind of help the officers, because they're not weather forecasters, or not weathermen. That's our job, and so we've made a change in that last probably 3 years, I believe, is since we've made that change where we have people come in.
I'd also heard someone mention that you shouldn't be much more than 3 to 4 blocks away from a cleared road if all goes according to plan. Is that what I?
According to plan, I mean, there are a few neighborhoods that just because of how the neighborhood's wider, we tried to have, like you said, what would be considered one of those collectors that would be close to that area. So as you within, as you can kind of see the grid, and this is a little hard, but in most of these places and locations, you're within one side or the other of about 4 or 5 blocks of being access to a street that's been plowed.
Since it's mentioned also that there is part of this policy that we have that if we get any snow that's over 10 inches, we will try to attempt to do some of the residential roads, the ones that are typically in the green shades that you can see. You can see them primarily up in the northwest corner of town and the northeast side in Spyglass. We are going to address the main primary roads first, arterials, collectors. I mean, that's what carries the commodities of the city. That's what carries the business of the city. And that's our primary responsibility. That's a huge area to cover. And with 8 trucks, when we're out running, we have to take care of those primary routes first. If we get that done and we've had a big snowfall event and we can get all those primary roads taken care of and under control, then we will consider starting to look at the residential areas. That generates some issues in the past. You got to put someplace for the snow.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to store the snow someplace. So someone's driveway is going to get covered up. Their car's going to get plowed in. And we don't have the capacity to go and clean all the driveways out. There's no way to prevent that from happening. So.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head too. On a lot of those residential streets, you're going to find more cars parked on the street versus on your arterials and things like that, which would be problematic as well.
The other problem you see is typically if you have a big, heavy snowfall like that, people are going to try to get out, and then they get stuck in the middle of their residential streets. Well, that generates a huge issue for us. We don't move vehicles. That's not part of what we're designed to do, is to go out and move vehicles. So how do you get around all those vehicles once they're stuck in the streets?
Right.
Yeah. What we really suggest, and it's later on in this presentation, is people just don't get out unless they have to.
Sure.
At what point do we contract, or do we?
We do have a contract, and we have money set aside in case we would have to do that.
Right.
But to my knowledge,
we haven't.
The city has never used.
No, it hadn't been in the last 12 years, at least, that I know of.
The previous Public Works Director, Reg Jones, like I said, I've been here since '91. I had discussions with him, and he had been here for a long time, and he doesn't recollect ever using that either when I'd had discussions with him, because we talked about just removing and not having a contract. But we did decide to go ahead and carry him. We've contacted APAC, for example, to say as a big contractor that has a lot of big equipment, if we would need that, would they be available? So we have the money set aside if we would ever need them.
If you would ever need it. Very good.
Very
Okay.
Any other
guys,
questions
good-
along that
good
line?
job this
No,
morning.
thank you.
Well, there's a
Appreciate
little,
the
there's a
briefing.
little bit more, and it only
Yeah, go
covers
ahead.
the equipment.
All right.
There again, if we'd already I kind of covered if there was a snow predicted, and if it's, we're going to have someone come in to check. Richard kind of covered that too. And snowfall events that are less than 1 inch, we're going to have 2 plows that are, and that's part of our policy. There's 2 plows that are going to have spreaders on them. And that's if we don't find a spot and the police officers are out, maybe find a bridge deck. I mean, we can't be checking all the bridge decks at once, but we will be out driving around. But they may find a location or have an accident someplace that throughout the scope of the city that, so they're there for us to try to go and address. And everyone needs to keep in mind that just because the south end of the city may not be slick, the north end may have some slick spots. There could just be that slight amount of difference in the temperature that makes all the difference in the world. The other things we have available, and if it's up to 3 inches or more of accumulation, we have the 8 dump trucks, and they're equipped with spreaders and plows, 3 front loaders, 2 road graders, 3 backhoes, and 4 dump trucks. There's also 3 one-ton trucks that we can attach plows to. And we might use them maybe on the downtown areas for the bulb outs, work around the bulb outs, something that the big trucks, they just can't work around those bulb outs. They're not that maneuverable. I would make note too, and it was mentioned in the other screen about pre-wetting the salt. All of our snowplow or spreaders have 119-gallon tanks. There's 2 of them on the spreaders, and they pre-wet the salt as it's coming out of the equipment. And that's another thing we've changed over the past 3 or 4 years since I came over to the street department. In the past, they dumped calcium chloride right on top of the salt, and that is a way to do it. But the problem that was generated out of it is that if the salt's left in the trucks too long, then the salt is naturally going to start caking again, and then you have trouble getting it back out of the trucks and all that stuff. This way, we may get a little bit of moisture from the snow while the trucks are out, but we're pre-aerating the salt as it comes out of the truck, not while it's in the truck. And we're getting a far better coverage rate of liquid on the salt when coming out. And I'd have to say, since I came on with Brian and the 2 supervisors, Cecil's been in the department for 15 or so years. Richard Buller followed me over from the utility side when I came over. He's been in his position for 2.5, but these guys have really put a lot of effort to become far more educated on what's done. We went to a lot of seminars. We talked to the Kansas Turnpike Authority, KDOT. We find out what other people are doing because it is more of a process than just going out there and slinging a bunch of salt and crossing your fingers. But there's no set, proven way that's going to work too, because every storm's just a little bit different. This is a map showing all of our vehicles have GPS equipment in them now. So this is just a generalized map showing how we can track when we start working a snowstorm event. We can track where all of our snow plows are.
And probably where they've been, right?
Where they've been, yeah, it's historical information, so it can track where they've been. And we can, if we did have a call or something, once they start to run their routes, we'd prefer that they finish off their routes and not get pulled off. But if there was an emergency came in from the fire department or police department, we're obviously going to respond to that. But we really want to stay on our routes, or everything will get off cycle for what we need to get accomplished. And the other thing that's also mentioned about snow is the ice storms, and no one likes to see that come about, but it's just another reminder, and ice storms are a beast all their own. The last ice storm we had generated a lot of problems with tree limbs, storing the tree limbs, getting rid of the tree limbs, all of that. And there's a lot of danger too, down power lines. We would just ask the public to not get out. There's just too much danger out there. The last ice storm we had, Westar, we had direct communications with Westar and the police, and we were responding to power lines that they weren't assured they're down, and we were contacting them. They just had, I don't remember what the call rate was, but like 200 calls an hour or something like that. It's just better if we can just, and our primary goal on this stuff is just to get the streets cleared. We don't pick up anything, we just push it off to the side, because we want to be able to have those responders, the first responders, the emergency responders in Westar, be able to get to wherever they need to go to. So if you have any calls that sometimes about, why a tree limb was pushed up off the street and it was just put into someone's yard, that's the reason why, because we're just trying to clear the street.
Just as a side on the ice storms too, I mean, we put the slide in of that car on purpose because the other end of that spectrum is if we have something on private property, a car, telephone pole, our guys won't move it. Would cause more damage. So those are the situations where if somebody calls you and wants to know why we haven't opened a road, there's usually a reason. It's usually that it's on private property of some sort. So we'll barricade that road. Same with the down power lines. We primarily are the department called to help set all the barricades for those situations as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had a couple of, like that one that Cecil mentioned, I think we had a tree down that broke across the road out in Spyglass. And the homeowner gave us permission to go ahead and move it, but we're not going to touch anything. It was crossing over some driveway abutments for his yard, and we're just not going to take that chance. Appreciate you adding that in, Cecil. And then the last one is just some tips to remember for everyone. If they can remove their cars from the street when they know there's going to be a snowfall event, there's a lot of people that will park on some of those arterial streets, Monroe or Adams or something like that. Some of those streets, we don't want any cars in the way. It's preferred not. Just helps our process. We have some issues at times where people live on those streets. They'll shovel out their driveway, and if we're still plowing, we've got to put the snow someplace. We don't have any place to store the snow except to the side of the road. So there again, the driveways are going to they might get some snow back on them again, and I know that frustrates people, but I'd hope that they would remember that we don't have any place to put the snow. It's got to go to the side of the road. But we would ask them not to throw the snow into the driveway. And if they do shovel off their driveways, shovel it to the downstream side of their driveway. Because when the plows come by, if they've thrown it out in the street and they've thrown it on the upstream side, then the plow's just going to push that same snow right back into the driveway. We would ask people just remember to stock up on groceries. Everyone's gotten kind of used to being able to get out and go whatever they do, but I might be able to tell my age, but I remember, you stocked up and you just didn't get out unless you needed to. And that goes on to the next one. Just travel, if travel is necessary, give yourself extra time. Everyone's a little rusty when we have snowfall events or ice events. Streets get a little slick. You need to acclimate yourself to the driving conditions. Remember what it's like to drive on slick roads, and anticipate you're going to have slower traffic speeds. So give yourself the time so you're not rushed. And then give the snowplow operators plenty of room so they can do their job safely. Is there any other questions that you guys might have of myself, supervisors? Or?
It might be a question more of John. Kind of a follow-up to the mayor's question. When the citizen says, "But why don't we clear the residential streets when I know so-and-so city does, et cetera, et cetera?"
Well, I think the answer basically is logistically it's really impossible. We've got 8 trucks, and we're busy on those routes. And when you looked at that one picture, and I always like that one in a residential street with a car on both sides, there's really no logistically way to get in there and clean those. And when you talk about the number of miles of streets, and I think people, when you kind of put it in that perspective and they realize, well, yeah, I just live on this block, I just want this block cleared. Well, look at that all around the city, and we're not a city that has 90 inches of snow a year that might have a lot more equipment. We average, 17, 18, 16 a year. That's not a lot of money, or not a lot of snow to invest that kind of money in the equipment that you would need and the manpower that you would need.
So part of the answer is
it's impossible.
It's resources.
Why aren't my taxes taking care of me, so to speak?
Yeah.
But it is a matter of how much money
we can spend.
We can spend, and a decision's got to be made to allot so much money. And
I think generally, we do a pretty good job with the resources. We do a good job with what we have, and working on the collectors, arterials, and a lot of times snows around here go away pretty quick. So it's not an easy answer to an individual that's upset, but we kind of repeat that every year that we don't do residential streets. We're going to have a street within 2 or 3 blocks of you, sometimes a block that you can get to, and you're going to be fine. Just get out of your driveway. So.
Yeah, of 680 road miles, to be able to clear just short of half of those in an 8-hour cycle, if it's one pass, it's actually pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would also keep in mind that, just another reminder on this, tips to remember, a lot of the newer cars are fairly low. And the air dams, for example, if you pull up to a parking bumper or a standard curb, you're gonna hit that air dam. So when people go out, if they put in perspective, if they can't see the curb, they're plowing snow with their car. So there again, I know there's this expectation, and it's talked about this residential area, that people should be able to get out and go wherever they want to, but there is the reality that there's just so much that we as an organization can handle when Mother Nature throws a lot of snow at us.
Right.
Like John said, the sun is our best help there. In 2013, I think we went 2 whole weeks with no weather, no temperatures above freezing, and no sun. It was cloudy for a full 2 weeks, and that hurt everybody in the region. It wasn't just Hutchinson, Wichita. Everybody in the region was hearing the same complaints about the roads and conditions of them. But there's just a lot to think about, and we are going to try to work. We're paying about $29 a ton. I think we haven't done a contract for this year, but I think that's going to go up, might go up a little bit for salt. And so when you look at that perspective of how much salt we put down per lane mile, the tons, there is some cost involved with that too.
But with the extra calibrations, minimal waste.
What we're trying to do, yes, with all of that, what we're trying to do is, and talking to the Kansas Turnpike Authority, for example, they are incredibly good at what they do, but they've fixed their technique to an extent. But they also they're having weather services. They give them suggestions. They track the surface temperatures of the bridges and roads. They have a lot of technology that we don't have. So there's a lot of it that's just going to be through experience going, this is our best guess, and we try to err on the part of safety. And if we need to put out more material, we don't try to skimp on the materials. I think there's some ways we can start to reduce that, and maybe that'll add sometime in the future an opportunity to look at how we're doing things and make it better yet. That's our whole goal, is not only to keep the service we're having, but to get better about what we're doing. And one of the other things I might mention with Richard's presentation with the salt brine, we are going to be looking at trying to blend our salt brine with the calcium chloride. So we can put a certain amount, 5%, maybe 10% of calcium chloride in there, so we're not using near as much money, but we'll get a far better bang for when we're using that pre-treatment process or pre-rating process, because that will lower the temperature, the freezing temperature of water some. And that's what it's really about, is salt, or the brine, is lowering the freezing temperature of water. And so the calcium chloride lowers that just a little bit more. And so if we can add just a little bit of calcium chloride in there and get a blend out of it, then we can be a little bit more successful, better there. But with this brine generator, when we acquire that, that's when we'll start on that process.
When you have the brine generator online for this snow season, this winter?
Yeah. I think the bids are going to be due to be put out. 24th is when they'll take a look at the bids and see what's successful on it.
Guys, good job this morning.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, you
Thank
guys
you. Realities of the tough work that you guys do. I think we're in good hands.
That's it. And the snow never falls 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. It's always 3 a.m. or something. So thanks for being out there.
So, Mr. Mayor, do you want to give your phone number for people to call then?
Let's do that.
You're interested in that?
Not it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the next item, Linda.
Item 7D, consider 2018 health and dental insurance renewal.
No PowerPoints.
Okay, Tom.
But good morning, Council. I'm Tom Sanders, Human Resources Director. I'm happy to be with you this morning to review our health and dental program, where we've been over the last year or so, and recommendations for 2018. Unfortunately, the last 24 months haven't been kind to our health and dental plan. We've seen a big spike in medical claims over the last 2 years. The bulk of these claims, when we've dissected it, are really falling in our $1,000 plan, which is kind of the plan that most of our employees are on. Those claims have been running about 17% above expected claims projections. To compound that, 2016 turned out to be a really bad year for our catastrophic claims. In fact, it's the second worst year we've ever had since being self-insured, which goes back to 2000. I'm happy to report 2017 is looking a whole lot better. Those claims have died down, but we are still kind of above our normal levels over the years, so we're still above norm. On a more positive note, our high deductible plan is doing very, very well. It's running 25% below expectations, so a little bit of good news there. In August, we got our renewal back from Aetna, or at least our initial renewal, and it reflected a 23.1% increase, which is kind of, you'd think, well, that kind of makes sense given our high numbers of claims that have been coming in. But nevertheless, we immediately started working with our actuaries at IMA to do our own cost projections and look at the data. And after a lot of crunching the numbers and data modeling and so on and so forth, IMA determined that 10% looking forward is really a more appropriate increase, and that includes without making any plan changes. I was a little skeptical of that, and so I asked a second actuary at IMA to take a look at it completely independently of the other one. He also came back with a number that was pretty close to that. So that kind of gave me a little bit more reassurance that, 10% was probably what we needed to be if we didn't make plan changes. But also at the same time being very cognizant that, our budget for medical insurance was 6% for 2018 and our overall situation with the budget isn't the greatest. I took it upon myself to do a little bit of benchmarking of our health and RX plans compared to other peer cities in the area, as well as looking at published surveys that are highly respected in the industry. And through that study, we found several benefit changes that made a lot of sense. And I worked with IMA to put together 7 different options for our Health and Wellness Committee to take a look at. We had 2 very lengthy meetings in September going through all these options. As you can imagine, there's a lot of data, a lot of questions. But ultimately, we landed on 5 changes to our current 1,000 plan. And those include increasing our annual deductible by $250 for our employees, employee-only plan, and then $500 for family coverage. We also decided to eliminate our $300 per member lab and x-ray benefit. That was kind of a holdover from the Blue Cross and Blue Shield era. Virtually nobody is doing that anymore, so that was a kind of a low-hanging fruit thing for us to look at changing.
Tom, that was just what, my first $300 of lab x-ray were just totally covered? Is that what that meant? Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
We also looked at the market data for office visit copays for specialists and found that that was a bit low, and so we're going to increase that from 20 to 40. And same thing for our ER visit copay, and that's going from $100 to $200. And perhaps the biggest change is that we're changing our RX plan from a 4-tier copay structure that we currently have now and have had in place for a number of years to a 70-30 co-insurance plan. No plan design changes are recommended for our high deductible plan due to its positive claim experience, so we're just planning on leaving that one alone. And I'll have to say that, throughout this whole challenging process, our committee was very understanding of the city's difficult budget situation, and they were very supportive of trying to keep premiums as low as possible. And so we spent a lot of time debating those options, and by making the changes that I just mentioned, we were able to get our premium funding reduced down to 3.3%, which is a lot of progress, I think. But as I put in my cover memo to the city manager, I'm recommending, and IMA is completely comfortable with it as well, keeping our funding level flat for 2018 for the medical plan, and using the difference, if we need it, to be funded out of Fund 32. That 3.3% difference is about $135,000 if we end up needing it. And we've got about, to the plus side of $1.1 million in usable reserves right now in Fund 32. So
what's that number?
1.1 million.
1.1?
Yeah, so very, very healthy.
Fund 32?
In Fund 32, yeah, very healthy. And just by a little bit of way of history, in 2009 and 2010, we also did not fund to full expectations. In 2009, we did 80% of expected, which that was a $705,000 potential. We had a really good claims year that year and ended up not needing to use any of it. Same way with 2010, we had a 75% of expected funding level, and that was almost $900,000, and we ended up not needing to dip into that as well. So we had the 2 times that we've done it in the past, we've ended up not needing it all. Anyway, if we choose to adopt that recommendation, employees that are on our base plan or a revised 1,000 plan, whatever you want to call it, they won't see a premium increase in 2018. And those that are on the high deductible plan will actually see a 7% decrease in premiums. So again, that's reflective of just the overall great claims experience that particular subgroup has had. Dental, unfortunately, has also been running higher than expected over the last 24 months or so. We'll see a 12.6% increase in premiums in 2018, which is a little over $21,000 in terms of the new money needed to fund that program. That certainly is a big percentage jump, but it also, I think it's important to note that it falls on a year where we didn't change premiums at all for 2017. So if you balance those 2 years out, I think it's not quite as bad. But also, we've had our actuaries look at the claims, kind of behind the curtains on the claims of that program as well, and a lot of them are more preventative in nature, and so they really think that as people are getting the preventative care taken care of, kind of getting caught up, you might remember we added that, I think, 2 years ago, that should level out. If that prediction turns out to be wrong, one of the things that we are looking at doing, and may come back to you next year about, is putting a maximum benefit cap per year on our dental plan, which right now it doesn't have one, and that's fairly unusual. And so
What's fairly unusual? Having a cap or
not having a cap?
Not having a cap. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't see a lot of those people going crazy on that, but it certainly is a cost driver that we have to keep an eye on for sure. In terms of the overall budget impact, again, if we decide to adopt the recommendation, we should only need the $21,000 next year for new funding for 2018, which certainly will help out the budget. You may recall during the budget meetings, 6% was what was actually put into the budget for medical, and 5% was for dental. So again, we should. That's with roughly $204,000. So we're well below that. So,
That'll help.
Yeah. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I've got several, Tom.
Sure.
Whether it's 90-10 split between the employer-employee on when it's employee-only coverage, or 80-20 when it's spouse or children, is that a policy that we keep, that we as employer cover a certain percentage of that employee or family?
That's in our labor contracts. That's kind of where that gets generated from.
The labor contract?
Yeah.
Yes,
And that is just for kind of our core plan. You know, our contribution percentages for a high deductible plan are a little higher than that, and that was again to entice people to migrate to that plan. It's a decision we decided to do at the time, and I think that's been somewhat successful. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And when there's
Is that
a
normally
percentage,
about the standard? Excuse me.
Yeah, those
from other
percentages were
cities and
those
public
percentages were
employees?
set many years ago. We used to have kind of a flat dollar in our contracts, but a number of years ago, the city decided to go to percentage, and that was based at market data at the time. It's probably something worthwhile looking at again as we go into next year, but I think it's probably pretty darn close even today. But.
and when there's a percentage increase across the board, that's equally shared by its percentage by the employer and by the employee.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what you were calling the 1,000 plan now becomes the 1,250 plan, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
all
we'll
right.
come up with something rolls off the tongue a little better, but.
Some comments or suggestions, Tom, coming from my involvement with the Healthcare Commission at the state level.
Yep.
And plans are intricate and involved, and you can't just say, here, do this.
Right.
But some thoughts. Targeting certain groups, whether that's the employee and children or employee spouse or whatever, if they're not solvent within themselves, maybe dealing with that differently, and that the same things don't apply across the board. Related, Do we expect spouse cover, for spouses who are employed, do we expect them to become their own primary insurer through their employment?
We don't have that policy right now. I know that's something that's been kicked around from time to time, and I think it's still, in my opinion, on the table. It's something we may want to consider going forward. But
I strongly suggest it. I mean, you know, if we've got a richer plan, we could be paying basic leave when a person has coverage elsewhere that they could obtain through their employer. You answered one of the questions I had. If we're incentivizing the high deductible. Not that that's the best plan for everybody, but oftentimes that's a darn good way to go. And yet people have this hesitation to move there. And so I realize that means we subsidize it and at some point have to quit subsidizing it. But high deductibles we're subsidizing if we can incentivize at least up to a point. So I wanted to make that comment. That's it. I know it takes a lot of work. So I applaud you on the work done. It's not easy, and the decisions aren't easy. What is the involvement? I know it's a matter of contract and negotiation, but there's staff that are involved as part of this
committee.
Kind of
sounding board. Or
we call it's an advisory committee. We call it our Health and Wellness Committee. And basically, they are kind of a cross-section across the organization. They come from all of our bargaining units. There's some members of management in there as well, and other non-union employees. And we don't meet regularly, but we meet when we really have something meaty to meet on. And like I said, we met twice in September after we got our renewals. And you know, we were just review, John attended the meeting. We talked about budget challenges and those types of things, and laid out, okay, here's what our renewal looks like, and obviously this is something we've got work to do, and so here's some options, and we spent a lot of time kicking that around, and it's a really good group, and but everybody's, it's just a tough issue. Everybody struggles with it. So, but I would have to say I give them lots of kudos because they are seeing, for the most part, both sides of the issue, that this is it's hitting them too. And so how do you divide the baby in a fair and equitable way that makes a lot of sense, but by the same token does things that like drive consumerism and those kind of things that ultimately I think help keep our costs down.
As consumers, we make better choices. Well, I just want to compliment. I think whatever its title, Wellness Committee or whatever, but to have employees involved and seeing what's being struggled with, and it's not just this.
Before we had the meeting again, I brought my data to the table and shared them with them. Said, listen, I've talked to Salina, I've got all their data, I've got Wichita, I've got Sedgwick County, I've got Derby, I've got all these other cities, and here's some other market data. Here's where our plan is kind of a little bit out of whack, where we may be a little bit rich. Here's where we're really good. And for the most part, I would say our plan is really kind of right down the middle. We didn't mess with our out-of-pocket max exposure at all because, quite frankly, at the end of the day, it really didn't move the needle much in terms of cost. But when you compare our plan to Salina and Derby, they have way more out-of-pocket exposure than what we do. But we're higher than Wichita. But they're a much bigger group. So they've got more buying power, and again, some of that total comp philosophy stuff goes in there too. So we spent a lot of time about, okay, where would it, if we need to carve back some benefits, what makes the most sense? And that's where that whole list of 7 different options kind of came up.
So there's 2 plans: the 1250 plan and the high deductible.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom, on the rate schedule there, I guess for 2019 budget, I'd like to see some comparative cities in Kansas in terms of how we compare to other cities in terms of the percentage participation.
Okay.
Employee, children, spouses, and so on, just to see how we compare.
I'd be happy to provide that for you.
That's not singular to the total plan, but to me, that's what I relate to.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess I'd like to see that.
I'd be happy to do
during
that.
the budget process, if you would.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Question.
Yes.
So to make sure I'm hearing right, the only changes are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 changes, correct?
Right.
Okay. Specifically to the prescription benefits.
Yes.
The 70/30 copay. Now, I guess first, what was the copay for the other medical, just medical people?
Yeah, we've got 4 tiers. We've got a generic, we've got a preferred formulary, a non-formulary, and then we've got specialty, which is all the really high dollar stuff. So for our generic, which by the way is about 90% of our total scripts, we do really well on that. It's $20 a pop.
Okay.
And then formulary goes up to $30, and then it goes up to $40, and then it goes to basically a 30% copay up to a max of $300 a year on the specialty drugs.
Today,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 70/30, as we all know, as we're reading, drugs are expensive.
Yeah.
That's something I could see really hitting individuals, especially if maybe they're not subject to other things, but they are subject to high prescription costs.
Yep.
Is there any way to incorporate tiers, or I saw that was looked at in the grouping there or whatever?
Yeah, we kicked that, believe me, we kicked that one around a lot. And again, 90% of our scripts that are filled in the city are generic. They fall into the generic, which is $20. And we went back and we dug some more data, and it's like, okay, well, what was the actual cost of those drugs on the generic? And the average was 15. The employee, if we had the 70/30 plan today, their cost would actually go down to $15 rather than 20. Now, obviously, we're talking averages. So some are going to be spot on at 20, and some are going to be 25, and some are going to be 40. Depending on the cost of that generic drug.
Okay.
Because not every generic drug's priced the same, obviously.
Right.
So, and then same way with formulary. And so what we were trying to do from a consumerism standpoint is let's make the real costs a bit more tangible. So, if I'm on a cholesterol drug and, it's only costing me $30 for brand, maybe I'll be a little bit more driven to talk to my doctor about a generic if I'm paying 30% and that's actually costing me $40 versus $15. If I got a generic.
Okay.
So the biggest thing that we struggled with was, quite frankly, is the specialty drugs piece of it all.
Right.
That's a really tough one, and I talked a lot with my colleagues with other cities about, okay, everybody's struggling with that. Nobody has a good answer. But the fact that we've kept our out-of-pocket maxes where they are, our employees that are on specialty drugs is far less exposure than what we're seeing in other cities. So in terms of their total exposure, which those people that are on those drugs are going to probably hit their out-of-pocket max regardless.
So the out-of-pocket max applies
Yes.
to prescription drugs as well.
Yes,
And what was that
absolutely.
max again? Remind me.
What was that?
300? Was that the?
Yeah, it was a maximum of $300. So
That's not very high.
it is not very high.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just to make sure I understand
Not
right,
high at
that
all.
guy who's taking a specialty drug that's $100 a pill and he has to refill on a monthly basis or whatever, the most out of his pocket will be the max, the 300?
Well, specialty drug, there's none that cheap. So we're
yeah,
we're talking $20,000 plus.
Forgive me, now we're
yeah,
talking, okay.
Yeah, we're talking about those injectables, those biologics, those things that are just they can be really life changing, but they are super expensive.
Okay, that's the specialty, and that's
yeah, like for example, the Hep A treatments that are out there, you see advertised all the time now. Those are great. They are also $80,000 a pop.
Okay.
So that's and so somebody who needs that treatment, they're going to hit their out-of-pocket max. I mean, they're that without a question. So whereas right now they're only going to be paying $300.
But the out-of-pocket max is the 8,000, 4,000,
Yep.
8,000.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
not 300. So,
Right.
yeah.
300 is what it is today.
Right.
Next year, it'll be the out-of-pocket max. That'll be the cap, and that's the
Which is
4.8.
still what we have. Yeah.
Forgive me, 8?
4,000 on single,
4,000 and
8,000
8,000.
family.
Oh, family, okay, yeah.
Little, not to further muddy the water on all that, but a little wrinkle that our plan has, and it's not uncommon, is that if you have a family of 3 or 4, for example, and one person's driving all your cost, your out-of-pocket max for that one person's only going to be $4,000. It's not going to be the $8,000. So if you have one person who's just really sick, and that, even though there's part of your family and the overall family is 8,000, that one person's gonna be capped at 4,000.
4.
So again, they're more protected there too.
But in the old plan, again, we would have been $300.
Right.
So that is a legitimate
Yeah.
increase.
And honestly, we looked really, I should have probably mentioned this, but you know, we really looked at, okay, where are our claims being driven and where are we out of sync? And pharmaceuticals was the one thing that really popped out. We're probably at least 12% higher than norm for a group of our size. So that was, again, one of those areas where we said, if we've got to do some cost shifting, which we got to do, this is probably an area where we need to do it. Not a fun discussion.
No, of course
Nobody
not.
likes it.
Well,
you know, I wish I
right.
could sprinkle pixie dust and make it all go away, but that's not the world we live in. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's a tough nut to crack, because like you
Yeah.
suggested, for an individual, knock wood, I'm not heavy in any prescriptions at this point in my life. That doesn't mean a hill of beans to me, but that individual who's on various medications or whatever, it means the world to that individual.
Right.
Did you say that there's money to help offset some of that potentially, or no?
Yeah, well, if our claims, you know, right now, what we're recommending is that we plan our expected claims at basically 97%. Instead of 100%. And so that extra 3.3%, if we need it, which, you know, would only need it if our claims really exceeded that 97% of expected, we could dip into our Fund 32 funds, which that's the $1.1 million. Yeah. To make our budget work in years past, like I said, I think it was 2009, 2010, we recommended the same thing, ended up not needing to even touch it. So,
when was the last time we touched it, if you don't mind?
Well, we've never really touched it.
Oh, that's not
Not for this purpose.
Yeah,
We
not for
haven't,
this
yeah.
purpose, no.
Okay.
But that doesn't, I mean, there's money
Yeah.
it doesn't just keep growing year after year after year, or does it?
Yeah, no, we use it to fund other things, for example, like our wellness program
Okay.
and, you know, our ACA fees.
So
and
you
being
seek to
self-insured,
keep
we pay
about 1 to 1.2 for health insurance purposes, for claims?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that 1.1 million is free and clear. It's not used to pay any current claims or anything like that. So,
claims.
yeah. And that's in addition to the 6 months that we keep in reserve, just in case we ever decide, hey, we're not going to be self-insured anymore and we need to pay these stuff out. So, yeah.
Okay.
So we're very lucky that we have a very healthy reserve there. That's very helpful in times like these. So.
Not to keep going back to the prescription piece, but is there a tangible or a fixed dollar amount that we can associate with keeping the way it is versus the change piece?
I can't give you a dollar. I could, but I don't have it here with me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, but it basically, if I remember right, it had about a 2.9% impact on total claims, I think. Somewhere in that neck of the woods. I could be misquoting it, but that's what comes to my mind. So it's significant.
All right, any other questions of Tom? All right, Tom, thank you for that.
Good job,
update.
and
Yep.
likewise to the committee that worked with you.
I'll pass that along.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
do we have a motion now?
I move we approve the proposed 2018 health and dental program changes as presented to us, and authorize staff to execute the group health and dental insurance contracts with Aetna for 2018 plan year.
Okay, motion and a second.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All right, any further comments or discussion? Let's call roll.
Soldner, Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
Daveline.
Yes. All right, next item.
Report of city
Okay,
officials.
Oh, yeah, we're down to city officials. Well, let's see, Steve, anything?
Nothing today, thank you.
Dave, how about you?
Nothing, thanks.
Nothing. Nancy, you got anything today?
Yeah,
To report us? No? No. Okay. All right, John, how about you?
Just a couple of quick things. You read where we're working on Martinez Trail now.
Yes.
So that's in process.
Yes,
That's a good thing to see how that turns out. And I think you probably have seen the list of railroad crossings they're going to be working on now. over the course of the next probably month or so. So it's good
I'm
to see
experiencing that.
You're seeing that, yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the initial work I think is just the rail work, and then they'll come back with some of the crossings later. But
that's good to see.
It's a
It's good to
lot
see.
of work they're doing, so it's a good deal.
It's good to
So.
see.
And the trail work is going to cause some closures, but pretty short time frames, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
just a matter of just a few
Whatever it takes
hours
to
here and
cure
there.
and
Yeah.
so on.
We can divert that traffic probably to another road to get
There you
around
go.
that.
Well, I was worried
So-
about snow removal on the
Yeah,
Martinez Trail, but I
right.
thought I might be alone on that.
We have had that call.
You wish.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay,
Thank
just
you.
one other item. I want you all, over the next few days, when the sun goes down, I want you to drive out on K61 Highway, Highway 50, and drive into town,
And look
because
at
we
the,
have new streetlights on K61 from US Highway 50 to Avenue G. And it
How's it
really
look?
makes a great improvement, guys, to the impression of the city. Thanks to Merrill and working with Westar and
Bruce.
Bruce who left.
Bruce,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So
No,
it's,
I'm glad I haven't seen it, so
it
looks
really
good.
is a it makes a
Yeah,
nice-
I
nice
usually come,
impression.
I
It
come
really,
in on
really
the
does.
Yoder
And,
Road, so.
as you
I
know, and I'm gonna lobby again for this, with KDOT, those guys at KDOT. I'm gonna go up there and have a talk with them, to work to get the streetlights, along Airport Road from Highway 50 to 4th Street. So that's the next project. And also, and I'm sorry she's not here, but I wanna publicly thank Jade for her representing the city of Hutchinson last week
Yeah.
in Manhattan, to accept from the Kansas Public Health Association an award that the city received. Jana, do you have any insights to that, or do we just? Yeah, I don't want to catch you off guard, but we were recognized as a city.
Yeah, the city was recognized for their partnership with, in the south, and their work in the Southwest Bricktown neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
From the Kansas Health
Southwest-
Foundation, you know,
Kansas
the
Health
city
Foundation.
is a partner with United Way, and other partners received a grant. And that was what this city council was formally recognized for their participation and support of that.
Yeah.
Good.
So, great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and Jade represented us
She
last
did.
week
Yeah.
in Manhattan at that. So okay. All right. John, did you have anything?
I'm
else?
done,
Okay.
thank you.
I think we're ready for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Second, please call roll.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Okay, John.